a tipikus egyiptomi szállodát, amiben volt szerencsém elkavarodni. Ugye a fal mögöttem még azt hiszem, hogy rendben van, minimális kolsz, nézzük az ajtót. Nem sok fény van, de... Okay, so the reason why I went with that transfer plan is that it's more adventurous, you know, and it's more exciting. And actually I have seen a little bit of Italy, at least the airport, and I've seen a little bit of Cairo, and I had a problem that needed to be solved, is that buying a bus ticket from Cairo to Hurghada, and that is very tricky because I don't speak Arabic. So this was a huge test of this country, that if I am a tourist and I simply speak English and I want to buy a ticket, then how hard it is to do that. That was my question. And that is always my question, you know, how hard it is to do that, how helpful. I need to know how helpful people are in that country, because it's a measurement. I believe I should say that my overall experience in Egypt was positive. But I realize that's not enough for you, isn't it? Unfortunately, I cannot give you any dramatic stories, because I feel I shouldn't get involved into other people's lives. I was there merely to see what's going on. I think my biggest surprise about the country could be described as stupid, because until I went there, I hadn't realized that it is an Arab country. I want to think it's not because I'm oblivious to the world, but the truth is, I should have realized it. However, as always, I can blame someone else, and now I blame my history teacher, who only taught us the history of ancient Egypt. Even though I educated myself when I got home, this story, what I'm about to tell you, is all about my surprises as a person with a completely empty head. My arrival to Cairo by plane was swift and unexpected by the public, but nobody really cared. I'm not the type of person who can easily be frightened, but the heavy military presence was a bit intimidating. Now, don't get me wrong, I didn't blame the system. I never do. It's their way of living. I didn't think I would meet a bunch of savages just because I've seen the military. And my original plan was to stay at the airport until morning, but I quickly realized that wouldn't be a popular option. Egypt has one of the longest histories of any modern state, having been continuously inhabited since 10,000 BC. Its monuments, such as the Giza Pyramid Complex and its Great Sphinx, were constructed by its ancient civilization, which was one of the most advanced of its time. Its ancient ruins, such as those of Memphis, Thebes, Karnak, and the Valley of the Kings outside Luxor, are a significant focus of archaeological study and popular interest. Egypt's rich cultural legacy, as well as the attraction of its Red Sea Riviera, has made tourism a vital part of the economy, employing about 12% of the country's workforce. The economy of Egypt is one of the most diversified in the Middle East, with sectors such as tourism, agriculture, industry and services at almost equal production levels. Egypt is considered to be a middle power with significant cultural, political and military influence in the Mediterranean, the Middle East and the Muslim world. Most of Egypt's rain falls in the winter months. South of Cairo, rainfall averages only around 2 to 5 millimeters per year, and at intervals of many years. On a very thin strip of the northern coast, the rainfall can be as high as 410 millimeters, mostly between October and March. Snow falls on the Sinai's mountains and some of the north coastal cities such as Damietta, Baltim, Sidi Barani, etc., and rarely in Alexandria. Frost is also known in mid-Sinai and mid-Egypt. Temperatures average between 26 and 32 degrees Celsius and up to 43 degrees Celsius on the Red Sea coast. Winter temperatures average between 13 and 21. A steady wind from the northwest helps lower temperatures near the Mediterranean coast. The Khamaseen is a wind that blows from the south in spring, bringing sand and dust, and sometimes raises the temperature in the desert to more than 38 degrees Celsius. Prior to the construction of the Aswan Dam, the Nile flooded annually, called by people the gift of the Nile, replenishing Egypt's soil. This gave the country consistent harvest throughout the years. The potential rise in sea levels due to global warming could threaten Egypt's densely populated coastal strip and have grave consequences for the country's economy, agriculture, and industry. Combined with growing demographic pressures, a significant rise in sea levels could turn millions of Egyptians into environmental refugees by the end of the century, according to some climate experts. Igen, ez vagyok én. De nem kaptam WC papírt, az remek, az igazán. Ez a régi bútorok, mintha a nagyanyáink korából származnának. Na menjünk a fürdőszoba felé, ó, bizony. Nem tudom, mennyien láttuk a Fűrész című remek művet. Ahol is egy ilyen hasonló romos környezetben forgattak. Bizony. Ez egy horror volt, de azért ezt közel sem nevezném horrornak. Minden esetre megvan annak a feelingje. De most Most, hogy megnézem a WC-t, nem tudom mennyire átérezhető az a feljövő pigyóka, amiről nem feltétlenül akarom megtudni, hogy mi az az. De lehet tippelni. Elben innen a csapból jön a cucc, erre ott bemegy, és hát igen, a megfelelő helyen jön föl. Ja, hát. Ide van készítve egy ásványvizes palack, hát... Hadd mutassam meg viszont a hűtőt. Nincs bekapcsolva, legalábbis csöpögtet, gondolom bedugva sincs meg hasonló, de nem hogy hűteni akarnék dolgokat, csak mégis. Vessünk egy pillantást rá. Nem mondom, hogy kellemes szagot áraz, de mégse olyan, minthogyha megöltek volna valakit itt. Ami szerintem tök pozitív, valljuk be. Tehát ki nem örül annak, hogyha nem gyilkolnak meg valakit a szobában, ahol éppen tölt egy éjszakát. Azt hiszem, hogy ennyi. Okay, first of all, when you arrive to Egypt, the Cairo International Airport, you have to understand that it's a very, very different experience, because you don't know where to go, you don't know what to do. At least I didn't know, because I didn't ask any questions. And that was a main goal, a main thing about my trip. Not to ask questions before the trip, you know, because otherwise I wouldn't see how things go. Because if you know how to go from A to B, it's not really an adventure, it's not really an experience. And that was the goal. So when someone jumped right at me, asking if I would need any assistance with finding accommodation, I said that there you go, I'm your man, just tell me how much money I should give you and let me get out of here. From then on, everything went smoothly. I got a SIM card from my phone, so I could call my friend in Egypt, who I was visiting. Also I got my bus ticket to Hurghada, and then got on the bus and got to Hurghada. Luckily, 7 hours of bus ride could give time to anyone who wants their head wrapped around the situation. I had time to think about everything. Arriving to Hurghada, I found my friend, I got to some diving and tried to adapt to my new living conditions. Which wasn't very easy, to be honest, mostly because my friend complained all the time to me how annoying they are. Everything. The taxi honking, the people jumping at you trying to do some business, and the overall noise. Of course, the heat didn't help at all. It would be very interesting to say that I had gone crazy, killed everybody in the city and got myself arrested, but that's not what happened. The truth is, I'm like any other people. I adapted. After all, I didn't hear the noise. I didn't get annoyed when people jumped at me, and to be honest, after a while they didn't do it anymore. I had become one of them, so they recognized. Also, now that I'm completely honest with you, the heat didn't bother me that much, and I was surprised because I thought that it would. But as they say, it's a dry heat. I met some locals and I asked my questions. They answered. Thus, I spent a great time in Egypt and I learned a lot. I learned when the sun shines all day, you cherish the night. When you have something to sell, sell it. Fun is not expensive, although I had already known that, but it doesn't matter. It's still something I learned. Again. Although diving is a bit expensive, so my fun was not that cheap. And people want to survive and work. Western culture may think badly about Arab people, but ultimately they are people, the same as everyone. Also, cows are great. A unified kingdom was founded in 3150 BC by King Menes, leading to a series of dynasties that ruled Egypt for the next 3 millennia. Egyptian culture flourished during these long periods and remained distinctively Egyptian in its religion, arts, language and customs. The first 2 ruling dynasties of a unified Egypt set the stage for the Old Kingdom period from the 2700s to the 2200s BC, which constructed many pyramids for about 150 years. Stronger Nile floods and stabilization of the government, however, brought back renewed prosperity for the country in the Middle Kingdom in 2040 BC, reaching a peak during the reign of Pharaoh Amenemhat III. The New Kingdom from 1550 to 1070 BC began with the 18th dynasty, marking the rise of Egypt as an international power that expanded during its greatest extension to an empire as far south as Thobos in Nubia and included parts of the Levant in the east. My friend's place where I lived wasn't very far from the main street. Even though taxi drivers were constantly trying to pick you up, it wasn't very far. It took me only a couple of minutes to reach the main street, and with that, the life of Hurghada. I can't remember if I told you before, but the heat wasn't actually very bad. It was quite bearable, even though it was more than 40 degrees in the shade. Since this wasn't my first walk, I only saw what I expected to see. Streets with full of sand and garbage. As I understand, Egypt doesn't have a garbage collecting system. Egyptians are very friendly, so I made friends quite easily, and one of them told me that most of the time they don't finish building a building because then you would have to pay taxes, and a half-finished building is no building according to the regulatory system. The first historically attested expression of monotheism came during this period as athenism. Frequent contacts with other nations brought new ideas to the new kingdom. The country was later invaded and conquered by Libyans, Nubians, and Assyrians, but native Egyptians eventually drove them out and regained control of their country. The Ptolemaic kingdom was a powerful Hellenistic state, extending from southern Syria in the east to Cyrene to the west and south to the frontier with Nubia. Alexandria became the capital city and the center of Greek culture and trade. To gain recognition by the native Egyptian populace, they named themselves as the successors to the pharaohs. Egypt was invaded and conquered by the Islamic Empire by the Muslim Arabs. When they defeated the Byzantine armies in Egypt, the Arabs brought Sunni Islam to the country. Muslim rulers nominated by the Islamic Caliphate remained in control of Egypt for the next 6 centuries, with Cairo as the seat of the caliphates under the Fatimids. Although I believe this to be true, to be absolutely honest, some of the buildings seem to be under demolition rather than under construction. These buildings remind me of the design of the communist era in Hungary, where huge state-owned companies built blocks of flats out of reinforced concrete panels. I noticed that in Egypt nobody really cares about rain, probably because rarely there is any, so I didn't see any gutters. These buildings wouldn't last a day in Hungary. But it's not like they would just pick them up and transport them here, so I believe they are safe. Luckily, my friend who I stayed with didn't accompany me to this little excursion I had. He really didn't like hearing those taxis honking at you all the time. Even this far from the main road, some taxis try to find customers. But of course we are not talking about kilometers here. We are only a couple of 100 meters from the main street, and soon we are going to arrive there. I have to be honest with you, I don't know why these streets are so wide. Probably there is enough space. I don't know what you think, but I like these designs. Everything's happy and colorful. If you compare it to the Hungarian equivalent, you would find grey buildings, one after another. But these ones are great. I really love them. I've been told that usually once a week a sort of garbage truck comes and they set the litter on fire. Well, that is certainly an efficient way to get rid of garbage, but I'm not sure if that's very healthy. As I reached halfway, I arrived at the workplace of a friend of mine. Our relationship goes way back, at least 5 days. He told me he is from far away and he came here to find work. Now I don't think he had to worry about commuting because he and his co-workers slept on mattresses next to the store when it was closed. They seemed very happy, not depressed at all. But what would I expect? I find that most people are happy with their lives. Especially those who are considered poor. They don't have to worry about the next stupid move of the CEO of their company or cramming over a problem which nobody has been able to solve. They make pita and they sell those and then profit. Maybe it's not a very lucrative business because I could get 2 of those for 1 Egyptian pound. Or was it half? People think that in my country, Hungary, everything is absolutely cheap. And even though our salaries are less than $300 a month, we can buy a lot of things from that money. But that's not true, because in Hungary you have the same prices as if you had them in the US, the UK, or even in Australia. There are only minor differences. However, in Egypt, I find that most things are way cheaper. Egypt was conquered by the Ottoman Turks in 1517, after which it became a province of the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman invasion pushed the Egyptian system into decline. The defensive militarization damaged its civil society and economic institutions. The weakening of the economic system combined with the effects of plague left Egypt vulnerable for foreign invasion. Portuguese traders took over their trade. Egypt suffered 6 famines between 1687 and 1731. The 1784 famine cost it roughly 1/6 of its population. After the French were defeated by the British, a power vacuum was created in Egypt and a 3-way power struggle ensued between the Ottoman Turks, Egyptian Mamluk Shah had ruled Egypt for centuries, and Albanian mercenaries in the service of the Ottomans. It ended in victory for the Albanians, led by Muhammad Ali. While he carried the title of Viceroy of Egypt, his subordination to the Ottoman Porte was merely nominal. Muhammad Ali established a dynasty that was to rule Egypt until the revolution of 1952. In later years, the dynasty became a British puppet. Muhammad Ali annexed northern Sudan, Syria, and parts of Arabia and Anatolia, but in 1841 the European powers forced him to return most of his conquests to the Ottomancy. His military ambition required him to modernize the country. He built industries, a system of canals for irrigation and transport, and reformed the civil service. Muhammad Ali was succeeded briefly by his son Ibrahim, then by a grandson Abbas I, then by Said and Ismail. The Suez Canal, built in partnership with the French, was completed in 1869. Its construction led to the enormous debt to European banks and caused popular discontent because of the onerous taxation it required. When I was preparing for my trip, everyone told me that I shouldn't drink any water from the tap and I should buy bottled water, which proved to be a very easy task because everywhere you can buy small bottles or even very incredibly large ones as well. Whenever I walk down a street, I always wonder about what those people do for a living. Of course, I can't interview everybody in a street, but it would be good to know, to satisfy my strange curiosity. The main street, loud and full of life. Now I think you can consider yourself very lucky because you don't have to hear all those sounds. But hey, let me show you how to cross the street. Local dissatisfaction with Ismail and with European intrusion led to the formation of the first nationalist groupings in 1879, with Ahmad Urabi as a prominent figure. In 1906, the Dishaway incident prompted many neutral Egyptians to join the nationalist government. In 1914, the Protectorate was made official and the title of the head of state was changed to Sultan to repudiate the vestigial suzerainty of the Ottoman Sultan, who was backing the Central Powers in the First World War. When the British exiled Zaghloul and his associates to Malta on the 8th of March in 1919, the country arose on its first modern revolution. The revolt led by the UK government to issue a unilateral declaration of Egypt's independence on the 22nd of February in 1922. The new government drafted and implemented a constitution in 1923 based on a parliamentary system. Saad Zaghloul was elected as Prime Minister of Egypt in 1924. Continued instability due to remaining British influence and increasing political involvement by the king led to the dissolution of the parliament in a military coup known as the 1952 Revolution. On the 18th of June in 1953, the Egyptian Republic was declared, with General Muhammad Naguib as the first president of the Republic. In 1958, Egypt and Syria formed a sovereign union known as the United Arab Republic. The union was short-lived, ending in 61 when Syria seceded, thus ending the union. During most of its existence, the United Arab Republic was also in a loose confederation with North Yemen, known as the United Arab States. In the 1967 Six-Day War, Israel invaded and occupied Egypt's Sinai Peninsula and the Gaza Strip, which Egypt had occupied since the 1948 Arab-Israeli War.
So what are we going to do today? The same as every day. We are going to destroy the world.
Oh wow. You were not supposed to see that. So Egypt in Hungarian, Egyptom. And let's go over the artifacts I gathered. See? Brilliant. So as I was saying, let's go over whatever I collected from Egypt. Oh, there we go. So, what do we have here? Let's start with the plane tickets. Oh boy, now this is not very interesting. This is Alitalia, a very well-known and major airline in Europe. Now this is far more interesting because Malev is no longer with us. It died a couple of years ago, but back then it was an interesting airline. It wasn't really paying off, so it got sold and sold and sold again until it went bankrupt. But sometimes Alitalia used its services to extend its reach. So next is going to be this fella, which is quite interesting. Now, I don't see anything here which is not in Arabic, so I don't know what it says. What I do know is that's supposed to be my SIM card. As you can see, it's quite brilliant. After getting this and putting the SIM card into my phone, it was supposed to work. However, it didn't. Because of reasons. And I had to go back to the Vodafone office, but then in Hurghada, not in Cairo anymore. And I received this one, which is, well, it's the number you take in a Vodafone office. However, I wasn't the 681st, it was just this number. I also got this very informative little booklet to help me with whatever I needed to do with my SIM card. Well, it didn't help, to be honest. Even though it was in English, at least the half of it. Now this could be a good start to learn some Arabic, but to be absolutely honest, it's a little bit complicated. So, well, you know how it is. Actually, we are not very far from the Vodafone office, where I went to try to fix my phone. Well, not really my phone, my SIM card, because the one they gave me couldn't be used to call numbers, which is strange, because I was able to access the internet, but I couldn't use my phone to phone people. If my memory serves me correctly, I went back there at least 2 or 3 times, and finally they succeeded in fixing my phone. Easy as that. Now at this point I was really wondering what people do here for a living, because the shop windows were full of souvenirs and, well, come to think of it, the main street was full of hotels, so probably these windows are for tourists. And the Egyptians really want to sell you their stuff. I too was almost literally grabbed from the street into a shop, served some tea, and was offered to buy some souvenirs. And I did, but I didn't have enough money. But that didn't stop them. We got into a taxi, went home. I grabbed some money off the counter, went downstairs, paid for the taxi, and then got my product. I know, I'm stupid. But how else would I have been able to test their endurance? Now I won't show you me going in the same street again, so let's just pick up where we left off, near to the Vodafone office. Some McDonald's are open 24 hours a day, which is a commitment. I found that in the UK they close very early, and even in Hungary they finish serving you things after 11 p.m. But not here. Whenever I go somewhere, there is always a question of whether I wanted to live there or not. Even though most of the time I don't seriously consider to live in that place, I take this question of mine pretty seriously. I tried to look up some scientific information using numbeo.com, but even though that data, I guess, should be valid and real, living somewhere doesn't solely depend on prices. I have to admit, Egypt is notably cheaper than Hungary. There is only a slight difference between Hungary and the UK, for example. It is true that products are cheaper here, but not everything, and not by much. However, in Egypt, there are things that are considerably cheaper than in Hungary. Renting an apartment, especially not in the city center, is way cheaper. I went to Egypt to visit my friend who is a diving instructor. His idea is that people shouldn't learn in pools, people should learn in the sea, where normal diving occurs. So I bought a plane ticket and went to Egypt. He rented a flat nearby the city center. In about 5 minutes, we could reach the main road, where every morning a minibus was waiting for us. And we went to the port to get on the diving ship. I mean a ship which eventually carried us to diving spots, and it wasn't an actual diving ship. I just thought it would be nice if I cleared that up. I figure no one really wants to buy food in the middle of the day because everybody is up all night celebrating the lack of heat. Holy cow, this is a very long main street. I remember when I arrived around 9 p.m. late in the evening, I got lost and I had to take a taxi, and that taxi ride took a long time, and I figured it was because it was the first time I had ever been to that city. Well, I guess not. Well, of course, I have to confess that I didn't figure out that Egypt is an Arab country, but what was a true and real disappointment, I found that on the top of those towers there are loudspeakers instead of people singing. I don't know why, it was just a disappointment for me. Those fruits looked incredibly fantastic. However, for some reason I thought that in order to buy one or touch one I need a hazmat suit. I guess I was overreacting the fact that in Egypt you have to be careful if you're a European when it comes to food and water. I'm Hungarian. I'm used to mass transportation, big buses, metro lines, trains, etc. I never would have anticipated that you can create a mass transportation system based on minibuses. Sadly, I wasn't brave enough to use any of those. I rather walked. But it seemed to me it's a bit like those small cars with full of clowns, and they are just keep coming out and coming out and coming out. So what I mean is, in those small buses, a lot of people can travel. Of course, there are big, huge buses, just like the ones I arrived with from Cairo. Most people think I'm very nice, but the truth is, I am not. And now, I'm going to make you watch the whole journey from the center of Hurghada to the ship. It will not be short, it will not be over soon, and unless you like discovering stuff on your own from a car, you should definitely scroll it through. But let me help you a little bit with the discovery. These minibuses can carry up to 15 passengers. Almost all of them are Toyotas, specially made for Egyptian taxi drivers by the Japanese company. There are buses that go on fixed routes, but some of them can be rented out, and the car we used to get into the diving resort was a rented one. During the 1967 war, an emergency law was enacted and remained in effect until 2012, with the exception of an 18-month break in 1980-81. 3 years later, President Nasser died and was succeeded by Anwar Sadat in 1970. Sadat switched Egypt's Cold War allegiance from the Soviet Union to the United States, expelling Soviet advisors in 1972. He launched the Al-Fatah economic reform policy while clamping down on religious and secular opposition. Sadat's initiative sparked enormous controversy in the Arab world and led to Egypt's expulsion from the Arab League, but it was supported by most Egyptians. Hosni Mubarak came to power after the assassination of Sadat. In late February 2005, Mubarak announced the reform of the presidential election law, paving the way for multi-candidate polls for the first time since the 1952 movement. However, the new law placed restrictions on the candidates and led to his easy re-election victory. Voters' turnout was less than 25%. Elections observers also alleged government interference in the election process. After the election, Mubarak imprisoned Aymar Noor, the runner-up. HRW's 2006 report on Egypt detailed serious human rights violations, including routine torture, arbitrary detentions, and trials before military and state security courts. In 2007, Amnesty International released a report alleging that Egypt had become an international center for torture, where other nations send suspects for interrogation, often as part of the war on terror. Egypt's foreign ministry quickly issued a rebuttal to this report. Constitutional changes voted on the 19th of March in 2007 prohibited parties from using religion as a basis for political activity, allowed the drafting of a new anti-terrorism law, authorized broad police powers of arrest and surveillance, gave the president power to dissolve parliament, and end judicial election monitoring.
Máshoz nem is ezért 20
Now, storing your meat hanging in front of your store might not seem healthy for me, I guess, because everybody does it, it's okay. And what do I know? At least if you need a piece of meat, you don't get a plastic vacuum bag with it, which later you have to throw out and then set on fire in order to get rid of it. I didn't know anything about Egyptian politics, so all I could see that guy was really happy, and sometimes he had bananas next to it. Now I still don't know what that means, and I may have forgotten to ask. My feet took me along a shipyard, or a shipwreck yard. But later I learned that those ships are not the interesting part, because there is a big one carrying home workers every week. I saw some people waiting for it. It reminded me of what people do to get the next iPhone. Now, I know I've mentioned this before, but since we are at a gas station, I should remind you that even though fuel is pretty expensive in Hungary, in here I would be really glad to fill my tank. Next I turned to this main road, or seemingly main road, which was a little bit more abandoned than the previous one. But I realized I was going out of the city. Later arrived at the port where our diving company has its headquarters, and I reached the end of my walk. Because I work through the internet, I think it would be a great idea for me to move to Egypt based on just prices.
Even though this idea seems pretty neat, we have to take the ongoing revolution and the heat into consideration. Also, it would take me a long time to get used to the cuisine. Not really because of the taste, because I have to tell you, I love Egyptian food, but mostly because of the different bacteria, which causes diarrhea. I can't dismiss this last one, because I experienced it firsthand. Based on my overall experience, I could get used to the heat. People don't seem more cruel than in Hungary, and the only thing that could disturb my inner peace is the trash on the streets. Which is not that big of a deal. So the answer to the ultimate question is yes, I would definitely can imagine myself living in Egypt. After this little experience, let us talk about diving.
Water is not a natural environment for us humans. Down here, we need breathing equipment to stay alive. Although we can see many things, we have only limited time before our scuba tank becomes empty and we have to return to the surface. Turtles and fish live next to one another at the coral reef. Without green plants like trees and bushes blocking the view, we are able to see other colors. Diving requires a whole set of equipment: mask, snorkel, buoyancy compensator vest, airflow regulator, scuba tank, diving computer, a wetsuit, fins, and on the surface, a dive logbook. Near the coral reef, animals and plants live in harmony. This clownfish is playing around in its home, a sea anemone. Others just swim around the neighborhood. A blue spotted ray always swims near the ocean floor. Sea turtles may live up to 100 years. As a final act, ships in their death become part of the underwater world.
Next in Hurghada, I needed some additional cash, so I went to an ATM machine, and this is what came out of the machine, along with the money, of course. So there you go. With little houses, which I don't know what they do. Quite brilliant, to be honest. And finally, this gentleman talked to me on the bus, and he was quite nice. He told me he was some sort of lawyer or a sales manager in this case. It would be really nice if I could remember these little details, but I can't. Anyway, the majority of my information regarding Egyptians and life in Egypt comes from him. So these are all the things I gathered during my journey. Ain't they nice? This concludes this chapter of the film. Enjoy the rest.
Okay, so and what I realized later on, that policemen were everywhere in a city, you know, at almost at every corner. And if you see a policeman and you know, you go from a policeman corner to a policeman corner and so on, you really are unsafe. Of course, you shouldn't go into alleys, you know, dark alleys where there is always something fishy going on. But you probably know it. I knew it because in Budapest, I find it that in Budapest it's quite dangerous.
After hearing these opinions, I thought to myself, well, I'm sure they are all true. There is no doubt about that. But if we analyze the behavior of Egyptians in the stories, would we conclude that they are that much different from us? Do all students want to learn in the Western nations? Do people not use the fame of their predecessors in order to make money? Are there only feminists in the Western nations? I really hope I haven't overkilled my explanation. And my conclusion that the Western nations are just as guilty as the Arab countries, for instance, does not come off as aggressive nor offensive. Let me be clear in one thing. I believe our planet is populated by people, not by nations. And most people, as individuals, are good. I think we should remember this, not the guilt.
لا انسى اسمها علقك مش علقك دول الزبده بتاعت الغردقه دي
Oh, hey, come on. You wanna fight? Let's fight. Boop. Thank you. Oh, you can't do that. You're too fat to do that. Hey, who are you calling you fat, you idiot? You motherfucker, you fat. Come on. Jesus Christ, no. Bang!